The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again. Today, I am speaking with Eraklis Petmezas, who is a writer and an artist who made some really cool little indie comics, did some tangential work with some other bigger companies, and has a long history in comics. And we have a great conversation. So tune into that. He mentions in the conversation people often call him Herc, for the for obvious reasons, I guess, because sometimes people have trouble with saying immigrant names. We have a conversation about that. You know, it's really not that hard to try. If somebody's name is not, we have this way of anglicizing names of immigrants that move to our countries, and try to make them, we don't necessarily force it on them, but I know they're trying to fit in, so they will accept other names or just to make it easier on the folks around them. But, it's not that hard. We do talk about it in the podcast. So, you can make the effort. I'm pretty sure you can pronounce Eraklis if you need to, or, as I mentioned, Cajo or Georg or any of those things that come up in the podcast. You don't need to anglicize them. But, if they're open to it, sure. If they're cool with it, fine. But, there's you can make the effort. It's not that hard. All right, well, before we get to the episode, there is something that has been nagging in my craw a little bit. And, that you're cheaper than a shrink. So this is where I get to complain without anyone answering me or trying to give logic or remind me about why my point of view may be flawed. I can just shout into the void, and you, dear listener, today are the void. I'm just going to say, never apologize for your price. I mean, me and Eraklis talk about this a little bit in the podcast as well, but I think it's something important that needs to be, reminded to you, the viewer, that if you are an artist, if you are a professional, if you have worked many, many years on your trade, your skill, whatever your particular field is, there are a lot of people out there. We do live in a capitalist society in which they're going to try to devalue you because they want to pay less for your skills. Never apologize for what you cost. If you have a fair value based on what you provide, based on what other people in your realm can provide, then don't apologize for that. You are worth what you think you are worth, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. All right, that's enough. I'm off my soapbox. I took the soapbox away, now I'm standing off it. All right, well, I have a long conversation, actually, with Herc. We had a great talk, in fact, and I don't want to, to waste all your time by listening to me talk about other stuff. You come here, you come to the show to see the main event, so here it is, the main event. Let's join in my conversation with Herc, or if you want to go with his actual name, Eraklis Petmezas. Enjoy. How's the day finding you?
Yeah, doing well, man.
Yeah?
Just I've been working on some stuff this morning, so just trying to catch up on some art commissions I've got. So,
Oh, excellent. The road
how
never.
about yourself?
Oh, yeah, busy. I'm a graphic designer, so self-employed and kind of always running around doing stuff. So,
Oh yeah, I bet.
yeah,
Yeah.
the same sort of realm. I mean, I did some comic and art stuff back in the day, and I kind of want to get back to it, but it's one of those got to find the time things.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh God, it's brutal.
That's the hardest part, because I got a day gig too, so
Mhm.
finding time obviously to keep up with all that kind of stuff and create and all that, it definitely takes the time. I'm fortunate because I started a sketch group about 20 years ago when I first moved here to Charlotte, and it's every Thursday evening, so it's just been really cool, just being around other artists, just kind of pushing each other, being positive influence to each other. So it's just kind of cool.
Yeah, that's really important with creative types, I think, is to have I mean, obviously when you have a regular job and you're trying to do a creative outlet like that, it's really important, I think, just spiritually, not that I'm a
Oh
spiritual
yeah.
person, but just like not that I believe in any spirit stuff, but just like in your soul, there's something that like, like deep inside that kind of unlocks when you have that sort of you get to do the art thing.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
especially having a group of folks like that around that to sort of embolden you a little bit to do that. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. We're really fortunate here in town too. We got a lot of great comic creators. I mean,
Nice.
my one of my close friends, Bridget Shiny, she or I'm sorry, Connell. I keep forgetting she's married, so I gotta make sure I use the
All
right
right.
name. But
Yes. Yeah.
but she works with a lot on a few of the Magnolia books. So it's just like I said, we got some cool people here in town doing some really great stuff, man, for sure.
So it's Charlotte, North Carolina you're in?
Yes, I am.
Oh,
Yep.
home of
Yeah.
Ric Flair.
That's right. Yeah, but a lot of the gang are wrestling people. So yeah, they definitely talk about that.
I assume there's a large statue of him in the town center in the center of the city. And
Actually, the gang said they used to see him around all the time. So
I'm one of my side gigs I do is I'm a professional wrestler. So I
I
do
saw that. Yes,
yeah. So
that's awesome.
so when I saw I think I saw somewhere in a bio that you were in Charlotte, I was like, oh, that's hilarious. So Ric
Oh
Flair
yeah,
country.
no doubt. Oh yeah. So yeah,
So I
people like
have
to wrestle down here, man. People like
Oh,
to.
of course. He's a legend. I mean, he's arguably one of the best wrestlers of all time. I
Right,
mean, he's been doing
right.
it certainly is longer than most, and he's a legend for sure. And
Oh yeah.
just an interesting character. I remember I watched that movie, The Iron Claw,
Oh right,
which
yeah.
which
I
is
haven't
about
seen it yet, but
it's
yeah,
good. It's good. But
yeah.
when they have a guy playing Ric Flair in it, and like he's good, but it's just like he'll never, he's not like it just you're like you just can't let yourself step away from it because Ric Flair is so iconically Ric Flair that
Oh
like
yeah, no doubt.
you can't like the guy's fine, but like he's definitely no Ric Flair, and you're just like it's funny because he has a very cavalier attitude in the movie about wrestling, about
Right,
what
right.
it as not a serious like he takes it seriously, but he's also like a bit of a partier. And it's funny because that's one aspect of Flair that's always he knows what the job was. He always did.
Right, right,
And
right.
he certainly played hard and worked hard. So that's cool. So where are you from originally?
Oh gosh, man. Originally, basically up in North Jersey, kind of right on the border of New York. So I spent most of my summers in Brooklyn at my aunt's house, which was a blast. But I've lived up and down the East Coast. I mean, I went to school in Savannah at
Mhm.
Savannah College of Art and Design.
Mhm.
Lived in Florida for a while. So this is actually the longest I've lived in one place. I think my whole life. Normally, I get tired of a place and I'm like, it's time to go. I'll try somewhere different.
Oh, really? Kind of nomadic spirit, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. But we bought a house. We were fortunate to buy this house before the market went insane,
Mhm.
because we definitely couldn't afford this house now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so how
think a
about
lot of
you?
people are in that world.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm in Nova Scotia, Canada.
Right.
So yeah, we bought this house just I think it was like 2018. Wait, let me do my math right. 2017, somewhere there.
Oh,
So it
nice.
was
So
like
yeah.
yeah, so it was like just before everything blew up. Like this place
Oh yeah.
is a mansion compared to what you could get for the value of it now.
Oh,
We
dude,
just lucked
seriously,
into
like
it as crazy.
I mean, our place is a four-bedroom place, and we have like two living rooms. I mean,
Yeah, yeah, it's awesome.
so yeah, and then I mean, it has a huge yard because it's in an older neighborhood, so the lots were back then were actually still pretty big because this house was
Oh,
from the 80s. I mean, like anything, it needs work. We got to redo the
yeah.
bedrooms at some point, but whatever. I mean, it's ours. We can do little by little,
Yeah,
and
totally.
you know.
I host trivia and there's some people at a trivia night I was hosting, like younger people that were sort of talking about like, well, you have a house with a room and in this housing market, you should definitely rent it out just to like help people with like, like just to help ease the burden of the housing crisis, like
Right,
especially especially in Canada, well, especially in Nova Scotia. But I'm just like, man, like I get this utilitarianism approach to
right,
life where you got to help as much as possible. But I'm
right.
also like, man, I like my space and I don't
Oh,
want
dude, no, I couldn't do it,
to,
man. No, dude,
I don't want
hell
to, I
no.
don't want a roommate just for the sake of having, just to help out. Like,
Absolutely not, man. I had roommates obviously like in
yeah,
college and
yeah, me
after
too.
college for a while, but nah, dude. I remember when I got divorced and I was in my early 40s
Hmm.
and everyone was like, well, because I wasn't really making a lot of money. They're like, well, maybe you can get a roommate. I'm like, fuck no, dude. I will literally do anything before I'm gonna get a roommate. I'm
Yeah,
like,
hell no,
I'm
man.
43 at that point. I was like, I'm 43 years old. No, man. I
Yeah.
want to be able to come home and my stuff is my stuff, and
Mhm. Somebody even suggested they're like, we have like a basement entrance to your place. Like, why don't you finish that part of the basement and then make it like an apartment? I'm like, I
Oh
don't even
God,
want to deal with that. Like, not
no,
that I have to
dude.
see the person, but just the level of like, I've had enough roommates over the years and seen a
Right.
lot enough crazy shit to be like, I cannot handle that, and I'm
Oh
not
no, dude.
like, I like my privacy, you know. I
Oh
like
yeah, me
not that
too.
I,
Me
you
too.
know, just I like to sit in my deck and smoke a cigar, maybe have a drink on a
Yeah.
weekend, like. I don't want to have to deal with a room like someone downstairs that's having trouble with whatever,
Oh
right?
yeah, man.
Oh
Or if they
God.
have a party or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah, fair
Oh
enough.
God, nah, dude. I'm with you, man. Hmm.
So before I guess I should get the elephant in the room dealt with just so I pronounce your name correctly. It's Eraklis?
Eraklis.
Eraklis. Okay.
Yeah, so the E is a long E, and then the I
Eraklis.
is also a long E. Um,
Eraklis. Okay.
yeah, but most people it means Hercules in English.
Yeah.
So
I like
a lot
Herc.
of
That's nice. It's a
yeah, a
nice.
lot of people just call me Herc, man. I mean, obviously, people who can say my traditional name, like my
Mhm.
wife says my name
Yes, of
traditional,
course.
they definitely do, but
And
for the
it's
most part,
Petmezas?
Petmezas.
Petmezas. Okay, great.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
as long as I have it, because usually the intro I'll give you your name, but I just want to make sure I pronounce it correctly. Every once in a while, I'll forget to ask somebody and be like, "Oh crap!" And I'll be looking. I assume it's Greek, obviously.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah. Although, man, I tell you, growing up, immigrants, everyone tried to Anglo-Saxonize me,
Oh, of
man.
course. Yeah.
They're like, oh, we'll call you Eric. I'm like, fuck no, man. I was like, that's like some banker bro, man. I'm like,
Yeah.
nah, dude. I absolutely not. I said, and no disrespect to people who are named Eric, but
Yeah. But
like,
that's
no,
not your name. No,
right.
I agree
I'm
with
like,
that.
I'm like, I like my name. It's like,
Yeah.
so my best friend, we've been friends since we were 5 years old. He was the one, screw it. We'll just tell everyone to start calling you Herc, man, because at
Yeah.
least they can
Herc.
figure, it's
Herc's
still your
cool.
name, but, you know, because I was like, yeah, dude, I like my name. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, and it's like I always find that funny. Like when you ever meet, like I used to work in a sign shop, and I'd always meet different people trying to start businesses. And a lot of them were immigrants that were like, Chinese restaurant or whatever, and like Vietnamese. And a guy was like, everybody called him Trevor, and I was like, well, I assume that's not your real name. And he was like, no, it's Kaho. And I was like, well, I'll call you Kaho. Like it's not that
Yeah,
hard, Like
right,
he's like, and
right.
he was amazed because I kept calling him Kaho every time he came in. He was just like nobody made the effort. And I'm like, it's really not that hard. Like there's a
Right.
guy, I'm on a board for a credit union, and the our CEO is from Germany. His name's Georg, and
Oh, wow,
everybody calls
yeah.
him George. And and I'm
Oh
just like,
gosh, yeah,
it's not that hard to say Georg.
right.
Like,
I know, I
like
know.
it's like I mean, obviously immigrants want to fit in and not cause stir.
Right,
And
right.
so they're not gonna, but I just find it like it just seems like such a stupid white person thing to be like, well,
I
your
know,
name is
dude.
close to John, so you're John.
Because like my cousin, for instance, his name's Januzo,
Hmm.
but everyone calls him John instead, but
Yeah.
except well, I don't, but
Yeah.
other people do. But I'm
Yeah.
kind of the same thing. I'm kind of like I don't know, dude. I guess I like my ethnicity, and
Yeah.
so I don't you know I want to at least always have that part of me because even like when I started doing
For
comics,
sure.
people are like, oh, maybe you can use a pen name. I'm like, nah, dude, I'm gonna use my name. I
Yeah.
was like, it's all right, it's fine. It's like
I've,
I mean, I don't
I've,
know how to pronounce every comic person's. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I have
yeah.
all these shelves, man. It's like there's
Yeah.
definitely people I met in real life, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you say your name. Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Well, it's
Yeah.
like I do some acting, and I thought about that when I was like first filling out my forms for like being
Right,
in roles because my name is Andre Mayette, but to look at it's not the easiest thing to figure out.
right,
So
right.
especially when not from right these parts. But I was looking at it and I was like, man, Chiwetel Ejiofor has a career. Like, and people know to say his name. I think
Yeah,
they can work their way through Andre Mayette. It's not that hard.
exactly,
Like it's pretty
exactly.
easy. It's relatively right. But cool. So your folks are your first generation stakes, but
Yeah,
your
man.
parents are from
Like
Greece.
I'm literally like, I am the American dream, like what
Oh yeah.
people used to consider. Like, my parents came to this country. They didn't know each other. They met in New York.
Oh,
Fell
awesome.
in love. Blah blah blah. Had kids. Um,
Are your parents
so
both from
like,
Greece?
yeah, they're both from Greece.
Oh
Yep.
wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, my first language is Greek. I
Yep.
actually didn't learn English until like about 5 5 months before I went to kindergarten. One
Yeah.
of my cousins came
Good
and stayed with us
timing.
for a little bit. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but that said, they made me go to speech class because I would slur my words
Mhm.
sometimes. I mean, I still slur my words, so I
Yeah,
don't know
you
how well.
sound fine to me.
I don't know
Yeah,
how well it's
I
going.
know one language, and I had to go to a speech person when I was a kid because I had a problem with. I think I said L's and N's. I would mess them up. So like
Oh yeah, no,
elephant, I would call it an elephant. So I
well,
remember.
it used to drive me nuts growing up because people would make fun of my parents sometimes, especially if they didn't know I was with them.
Mhm.
Um, but I'm like, they can speak two languages. You barely can speak English in
Yeah,
your front. And I'm like, you need to step back a little bit here, guys.
100%. Like Canada's a bilingual country. I don't speak French
Right,
very well, so like I
right,
just
right,
I
right.
try. I wish I did. My wife speaks it very well, but I just
That's awesome. Yeah,
and
when we finally went to France, I wish I spoke it better. I know like very little, enough to get
yeah,
by, but not
yeah.
enough, to
I
actually
always
have a
say
conversation.
petit peu, like which means a little bit when
Yeah,
someone asks me if I speak French. So
yeah, yeah,
a little bit enough that I can when I go to Montreal or something, I can order off a menu or go to a restaurant. Not
yeah. There you go.
not force them to speak to me in English, but not enough to be like just crawling through. But in Greek's an interesting language. A friend of mine had a girlfriend from Greece for a long time, and I remember her I don't remember anything, but she taught me some Greek phrases and words just when we were goofing around. The
Oh
only
yeah, no
the only
doubt.
one I remember was "Sana Pao," which is "I love
Oh
you." I
yeah,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
well,
right.
yeah,
So yeah.
yeah.
So that's the only one that stuck through. I remembered it so I could tell my wife it, and then that's about as far as I got. So,
No, it's all yeah. Because I tell you, we went to Greece in September, and I hadn't been back in 40 years. So, um,
oh wow,
and it was neat because like my wife was like, "Oh, it's so cool because you just talk to everybody and get around it very easily. As opposed to some of the other countries we've traveled to
hmm
where I know like very little
yeah,
here
yeah,
Spanish or very little
yeah.
other depending where we were traveling to.
It's kind of
Um,
nuts though, because with phones and Google Translate apps
oh
and all this
yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
you don't really need to anymore. Which
absolutely.
it's cool because it makes it more accessible to travel, but it's also like kind of takes the impetus away from you to actually learn the language or maybe a bit of the culture on your way over. So,
Right.
although
And I
hope,
always feel like out of respect I want to at least be able to say some things, you know what I
yeah,
mean, like I don't want to be like that asshole American, that goes to their country like where's the ketchup, I mean,
yeah,
or some bullshit,
yeah.
um so I'm always like you said, I try to do
Uh,
my best, at least like even when we went to Central America, a lot of people speak Spanish there,
hmm
so I tried to make sure at least I knew some words and
hmm
enough to try to have a little bit of a interaction.
Yeah, of course. No, it's the way that's the best. Like I went to Cuba recently, and it was
Oh, nice.
yeah, and it was same thing. Obviously, they speak Spanish there, but it was uh, it was interesting. I enjoyed the trip. It was funny because like Canadians, there's no problem to go down there. Americans have some problems,
Right.
but there's a lot of a lot of people from Europe there. There are quite a few Russians there because like they
Oh,
still
wow.
have their trade agreement or whatever with Russia is still kind of in place. So decent amount of Russians, Germans, other people around. But it's interesting being on vacation somewhere and there's no Americans around because it's
Right.
usually like it's very interesting. And
Right.
like we went on a tour to Havana, and the guy that was giving the boat tour, very matter of factly, but he was just like going through the history of Cuba. It's like, we did this, and the Spanish really fucked us, and then we did this and this. Then the Americans kind of fucked us, and we did this, and then the
Right.
Americans fucked us again. And then like he's going through like this whole, and it's
Right.
like, oh yeah, you guys really got the raw end of the deal down here, unfortunately. But
Oh, yeah, no doubt,
it's
man.
funny. Well, were comics always a thing growing up? Like you said, you moved around a lot. Were
Oh,
comics
yeah,
always in
dude.
your
Yeah. I mean, because, we were poor. So for me, like, I felt, especially when I started reading comics, I mean, I think they were 35 or 40
Hmm.
cents. I can't remember, So,
Golden age?
yeah. So, I always worked. I mean, like, even from 8 years old on, I had a paper out first. So, I always try to make my own money so at least I can go buy comics.
Yeah, yeah,
So, because it was something also cheap, but also something obviously I fell in love with for sure. And even the library, of course, the library. I love going to the library because I was able to rent,
yeah.
check out books and be able to read and still kind of have that, even though we didn't have a lot of money, for sure. So oh yeah, no, dude, me and my best friend. I mean, we. That's one thing though. It's funny because a lot of my younger friends, especially some of the younger SCAD kids, they always are like, "Man, you're just so different," because most people want to work for like on other people's characters, and I was like, honestly, I've never really. I mean, I've done stuff for Marvel and DC here and there,
Mm-hmm.
more behind the scenes, and I've pitched things through the years, but that was never my goal, man. Like I didn't want to tell other people like, like it'd be like being a filmmaker and being like your only goal in life is to only work on Star Trek, or something. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
So for me, like I always wanted to tell my own stories. I always wanted to have my own characters. I always wanted to. So even as a kid, me and my best friend, we would create these like worlds of stories, of comics, of characters, that we would do together, and and separately, of course.
Nice.
So for me, and I mean, and I mean, obviously you can see, I mean, I
Yes.
love, but that said, even when people come over, they're always like, wow. I was like, honestly, most of the superhero stuff is only one small shelf there. The rest of this stuff is stuff that no one even has ever seen in half the time. They're like, I'm like, yeah. I was like, Dark Horse puts out stuff every year, these amazing graphic novels that no one knows about because one, they don't promote them in any way.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a friend of mine, I mean, we talk very frankly about money, so that's something, I'm good friends with Andy Rutten, who does Owly. I don't know if you're
Oh, yes, I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so years ago, we both were very, important that we talk about money and about what we make and about these deals that we're making, not just for us, but also because we want to make sure other people understand this stuff.
Yeah, that's very true. That's how, like, that is, and I don't want to like get into like conspiratorial capitalism talk, but that is how big companies exploit people because,
hell yeah,
like society makes it taboo to talk about what you make, like it really matters. Like people judge you on it or whatever, but it's like this is how people are aware of what if they're being exploited. Exactly, yeah. Like,
I remember I worked for one of the biggest banks in the world for 15 years. And I remember some of the higher managers would always be pissy because they'd be like, well, you're supposed to talk about your salaries. I'm like, well, first of all, that's not a rule. And
it's not a law. Like I can do what I want.
No, sorry. Yeah, we can absolutely talk about it because that's how we find out that, this asshole that I've been training for the last 2 weeks is making $3 more than I am. And I've been here for 5 years,
Yeah.
It's like, no, bro, we are going to talk about it.
Yeah. And it's so dumb. It's so obviously like to their benefit. You know what I mean? Like what,
absolutely.
like they have no way to say, oh, like there's no valid reason that you shouldn't, beside like just to say you shouldn't.
Can't
like
fire you over it.
Yeah. It's dumb. Sorry. It's super dumb.
I get into it all the time with some of my higher up managers. I'm like, nope, absolutely not. We talk about it at all, especially because I've been a manager and I was always very frank with my people.
Yeah, constantly. That's a good manager.
I said, no way. I said, and then the one position I had, a lot of the roles that were underneath me were kind of entry level. So I kept telling my team, I was like, guys, I love you. I love working with you. However, I don't want you here in a year or two. I want you to get a better job, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get you there. So you need to tell me the kind of things you want to do, the kind of things you like, and we'll get you there. I don't want you here in 2 years because this is entry level.
Yeah.
You're only ever going to make so much here because let's be real. Raises are pretty much non-existent. I mean, even when you do give you one, it's like 2 to 3%.
Yeah,
which is nothing. That's like a Coke Zero.
Yeah. It's right. I mean, buy a Coke on your break. Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. I'm like, luck. This is not. You can't even see this in your paycheck. I mean, give me a break. But anyway, that's a long story to say that like I have a good friend of mine. I mean, she worked for freaking 2 years to put out this graphic novel from Dark Horse, and she's like, well, Herc, I made $15,000, and that's all the money I'll ever make in the world because one, they didn't promote it. It's not going to go into any more printings than what they made, so that's it. She's like, I literally worked on a 150-page graphic novel that I drew and colored, and that's all the money I'm going to make in the world.
Wow.
That's what no one understands. I mean, even First Second and all these companies, everyone thinks, oh my God, I got this great deal, and I'm like, yeah, but break it down, guys. Break it down. Because I remember when Craig Thompson did blankets. Yes. Everyone was talking about at these different conventions because they gave him like $100,000 check, right?
Yeah.
But then I'm like, yeah, but keep in mind, he was literally living next to a crack den the whole time he was working on that.
Yeah.
It took him 6 years to do this.
Yes.
I'm like, break this down, guys.
Yeah,
Let's break
that's not
down.
That's not that nice of a return on investment after 6 years of work.
Absolutely not. No. Luckily, it's gone into multiple printings. And,
yes, he's reaped the benefits since, but no.
But most of these books don't. Most of these books, that's it. They one printing, and if they're lucky, maybe it'll get translated to another language, but most of them don't. I mean, shoot, I can show you. My shelves are littered with stuff. You know what I mean?
I got a library here in my house that we built, and it's full of books like that. Like there's a company out of Quebec called Drawn and Quarterly that does a lot of
Oh yeah, dude.
indie books, and
Absolutely. Love that.
there's a lot of cool stuff that I come across in there. Like even just a book. Troy Little and Brenda Little are friends of mine. They work. They're in
Oh,
PEI,
cool.
but they work on.
Yeah,
If you're
I love
familiar
their
with them,
stuff.
yeah, very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, so they have their own little imprint they started, and they went to some comic thing in Europe, and they were telling me about this one comic. I think it was. Is it a French comic about like little nymphs that live inside the body of like a dead girl in the woods?
Oh no, they translated
Yeah,
it.
Beautiful
Yeah.
Darkness, I think it's called.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And I just picked it up and I'm like, this is a beautiful, amazing book.
All their work, I'm telling you, they've translated, let's see, I think 5 of their stuff.
Yeah.
It's all with it. And it's
Yeah.
all weird, man.
It's cool.
It's all like it's just like crazy shit. Oh no, dude, when I finally went to France, I mean, I can't show you the stack 'cause it's too heavy, but if I put it on the table, it would go past the camera. I brought empty I brought an empty carry-on.
Nice.
That thing was so heavy, brother. I was trying to pull it up, and the guy that was sitting here was like watching me the whole time. Like, oh, shit, dude. I barely could lift this thing up.
If there's turbulence, that's gonna kill you.
Oh,
that
dude.
bag's gonna kill you.
Oh man, it was, and it wasn't even all the books. I still fit more in my like actual luggage.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get back here again. So I was like, I need, I'm going to buy as much as I can.
There's just so many cool, different, like when people talk about comics, it's like people that just know comics through like the movies or whatever. Like, and I like superhero stuff, all right. I like the Marvel stuff too. I have a Spider-Man tattoo. Like that was a big part of my life growing up. Like, but like, there's so much. Like you could any story, like The Walking Dead kind of gave people a little bit of insight about how there are these comics that are different than just superheroes. But there's so much before, so much after.
Definitely.
Like even just like insane amount of cool stories. There's this one I really love called Elmer, which is about a world where like chickens suddenly become sentient.
I have it right there.
That's a good. Man, I'm to chat with you about weird comics to read.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, whenever we have Heroes Con, we once we bought the house, I host Saturday nights of the convention. I just have everyone come here. We get pizza.
Oh, that's awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah, because we also, we built a screen and porch right before COVID started, which actually works out great because my wife works out there most of the day.
Perfect.
When it's not too bad. But yeah, so then of course everyone comes in here and they're like, "Oh my God, what is this? I've never seen this before in my life." And I'm like, "Yeah, because it's no one really talks about this, but it's amazing."
Yeah, there's another book recently too. I caught called by Nick. Is it Deserano or something? I don't pronounce his name right. It's like DSR. It was called Sabrina, I think, and it was
yeah. It's awesome, dude.
Yeah, I heard they're making it into a movie, and I'm like very excited to see. Like the art is very strange, but it's
it is very strange.
But I'm okay with that. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. I guess too. I was pretty fortunate. Like, obviously growing up, I was also part of the heyday of a lot of the independent stuff, especially in the 80s. A lot of these great Comico, you had First, you had Eclipse, you had all these amazing companies putting out really cool indie shit, I'm Dave Sim, of course, starting up at ElfQuest as well. But I was really fortunate because I went to Greece when I was 12. And when I went there, I got exposed to all the French shit, like Lucky Luke, Asterix, a lot of that stuff. And I was like, oh, once I saw that, bro, it was all over. I was like, no, this is the stuff I want to do.
Awesome.
I was like, I want to do more, kind of stylized, kind of, I even hate using the word cartoony art because, these French books, let's be really gorgeous, right?
Oh, yeah.
They did, their model there, they put 2 or 3 of these books out a year, tops 48 to 64 pages. So these, every panel is like gorgeous, like every, this whole street scene in every single panel, Jesus Christ,
Oh, yeah. Like I was looking at, was it Sean Tan's book, The Arrival?
Oh, yeah.
And like that book is insane. Like
Dude,
every small detail and beautiful, gorgeous, like massive sprawling pages.
Absolutely.
That indie boss boom, like when all that stuff came around. I had Alex Robinson on here, the creator of Box Office Poison, a while ago. And
I love that book too.
Me too. And like even like Our Expanding Universe, the one he did later, like I really love all of his stuff. Trick, all that stuff. So it was a real treat to talk to him. He's kind of gotten away from it. He's sort of focused on podcasts now. But
I know. It's sad because especially, I don't know how old you are, but growing up in the 80s and seeing a lot of these amazing talent that just kind of left comics,
Yeah.
you know. Because I mean, like when like I told you on Saturdays, you know, of the con, everyone comes over and I'll pull
Yeah.
out something, and I'm like, man, this guy, you know, he only did 3 books, you know, in the '80s, and they were all amazing, but you know, then you know, they just
Yeah,
went on to
it's
do
so
other things.
sad. And then you, especially like actors or other people, like you'll find out they're just like gave it up and they're like,
Right.
there are some director that made some crazy movie that you love deeply. Now he's like a real estate agent and like, so
Right.
you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
like you're
Right.
like, well, it sucks. Like
I know.
maybe I
Yeah.
hope they're happy, but
Well,
obviously
yeah,
there was something within them to make them
you
want
would
to
hope
create that
so.
art.
Well, yeah, because one of my favorite college bands, they were called Blighto Body. I was friends with them. They were out of Columbia, South Carolina. And in fact, they were on Conan O'Brien. I mean, we really thought they were just going to become this huge band. And in fact, they're on Spotify now. So if you get a chance, they are streaming.
Cool.
Anyway, they're very strange. They're kind of like this very eclectic kind of arty band. You know, more
Those are
in the
my
vein of
alley.
Talking Heads ish in the sense,
Yeah.
not that they sound like them, but that every song is very different, you
Mm.
know, and very instrumental. Um, but the problem is labels love them. All these labels were all around, you know, circling them. However, they're like, but your stuff is so eclectic, we don't know how to sell it. And I'm like,
Mm.
but that's your job. That's your job. You know what I mean? It's like the music, the music's great. So it's your job to figure it out. But the same thing, man. Two of the guys, I mean, Brian McCarter, man, he's this, you know, amazing lyricist, a great singer. He went to work in real estate because he's like, dude, you know, the drummer, you know, he's like an anesthesiologist, you know. So you know,
What a
it's like,
shitty thing to say. Like,
yeah,
no,
man,
like you guys are so unique, you're so cool, but we just don't know how
right,
to market you, so we're not going
right,
to try. It's like, fuck you.
right. I
Like,
know. It's like, well, I mean, you know, you read about stuff like even Sleater Kinney. Let's be real, they're like
yeah.
darlings.
Oh
But
yeah.
they said that they'd come back off a tour and they'd have to go back and work their shit jobs because you know they weren't
Yeah.
making, like, you know, it's not like they're rich, you know. I mean,
Come
you
on, man.
know,
If Devo can have a career, I think the rest of the
yeah,
world can. You know what I mean? Like there's
right,
like there no matter what your deal is, there's a market for it. If Tiny Tim had a music career, there's people out
oh
there
yeah,
that are,
no doubt,
somehow you'll make it work.
no
But
doubt. Sorry, yeah,
crazy.
I didn't mean to ramble on, man.
No, no,
But
dude, I love this is what it's about. It's casual conversation. But like getting into like building your own worlds when you were younger and stuff, what was
yeah,
the first entry into comics? Like what was your first thing?
gosh, man, I'm trying to think. Like, you know, it's so crazy how so many people can like remember
Mm.
like the first comic they
Oh
bought, you
God,
know.
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
can't. Like, I can remember the first comics that I really kind of sparked something in me.
Hmm.
Like, you know, Byrne, X-Men, and then of course later Paul Smith, especially. Like Paul Smith, just something about his work just really spoke to me.
Really?
Um,
That's
yeah,
not a name that comes up that often.
I I know, and it's
John
so
Byrne does, but not him.
yeah. But now, you know, Paul Smith, dude, I'm telling you, you know, I'm so excited because they're doing an artist edition of Paul Smith's work. So,
Oh, really? Awesome.
yeah, yeah,
I'll have to check
yeah,
that
and
out.
I love it. So that as far as like the superhero type stuff, you know, I really like. But I also always loved like a lot of the weird magic characters, from Marvel and DC, like, you know, gosh, like the demon,
Mhm.
you know, and then son of Satan, you know, things like that as well. But and I know you might laugh, but Blue Devil, I don't know why,
No, I always liked
but,
that comic growing up.
yeah, dude, that, and people forget, like, you know, because when people talk, give me shit about it, I'm like, you know, it was a top 10 book at one point, guys.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, in fact, I had a great pitch in the '90s at DC that really made some traction. And I was really hoping it would go through because I was like, man, I'd love to do a Blue Devil story. I was a writer though.
Mhm.
More the stuff I was working on in the mainstream world in the '90s after I graduated, I was actually working more as a writer than I was an artist.
Mhm.
You know, my work just isn't like superheroish, especially at that point in
Mhm.
time. No one was like, yeah, it's not. My work does not look like anything like what was going on in the superhero world in the '90s. So, especially the '90s. But yeah, so I guess, you know, that really just sparked something in me. And of course, like, you know, typical like Marvel's Hercules, obviously, you know, in the
Mhm.
'80s had Bob Layton had that great miniseries that I loved because of course being Greek, I was like, oh, so, you know, I was like, this is
Your
awesome.
hero. Yeah.
So in fact, it was funny because the Heracles comic I wound up doing for, you know, myself a couple years back was actually a pitch I did for Epic originally when
Oh,
they were trying,
really?
yeah, when Robert Kirkman was trying to bring Epic back,
Yeah.
they asked for, you know, submissions, you know, and so I pitched a whole Hercules miniseries to them, and people dug it, but unfortunately they put out, I think, like one comic, that Sleepwalker comic, and that was it. And then they decided to cancel the line again, which is like the story of my life, man. I mean, like
Yeah.
a Creeper miniseries. It was like a 3-issue miniseries that was going to come out. It was going to be fully painted by a good buddy of mine. It was gorgeous. We did a few, like about half an issue. I wrote all 3 issues.
Nice.
They gave me a kill fee, but it never came out because Keith Giffen had just killed the Creeper in Eclipso. So they're like, oh, we're gonna have to wait a while. But I'm like, this doesn't really. I said, this is a standalone story, though. It doesn't really
Can
have,
take place before he died, whatever.
yeah, it doesn't
Like,
really. I said it's plus it was a fully painted comic when the fully painted comics were really popular.
Mhm.
I was like, it's very different. I was like, but whatever. It didn't happen. So.
That's a shame. Well, when it
But
like so when you got into doing comics, like what was the first thing you did? Like what was your
um,
entry into books?
you mean like as far as like
Like
creating?
creating, yes,
Oh
absolutely.
gosh. Yeah, I guess like in the sorry, in the 90s, talking about like I was trying to break into Marvel and DC and Vertigo especially, and Dark Horse. Like I had a pitch of a Grendel Tales miniseries
Oh,
as
nice.
well that had some traction as well. Yeah, because my buddy Zach, who was drawing it, dude, absolutely amazing. But if I'm honest, after that, I got tired of pitching and having pitches go nowhere, and I wasn't really making any money because
Mhm.
that's another thing that they don't tell you about. These editors love to, be like, hey man, pitch me this, pitch me that, but if they don't pay you for those pitches,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
so if the book doesn't happen, you're doing all this work and you're not
There's
really making.
probably like what 5% of all spec scripts that actually get made. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like it's
Exactly.
insane. Like in film and comics and anything. Like everybody
Totally.
has their dream project and they want to make it, so they do it. But then like the actually selling it is a huge hurdle.
Oh yeah, yeah, very much so. So really, sadly, so for quite some time, I really wasn't working on art at all. I went into the printing industry, so I became a production manager.
Mhm.
Um, so I was working with the artists, I was working with pressmen, salesmen, clients, all that kind of stuff. So really, for a long time, I wasn't really doing much. I was doing some freelance work, but not a lot.
Mhm.
So then finally, I kind of was like, man, I love comics. Comics are my first love. So the first toe I dipped back into, I guess the scene, I did this little short Mr. Loon comic. He's like this little moon man guy that goes on these weird kind of surreal adventures. So,
Yeah, I love the
um,
design. It's very fun.
oh no, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Actually, it's taken off a good bit. Like on Amazon, I keep, I sell a good bit every day. Seems like, through
Oh, good.
them.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, because what I started doing for this hero for every year for Heroes, I like to premiere at least one book. So this year I was like, well, I started doing some new Mr. Loon pages, and I wanted to do in color because a lot of my friends were like, well, it's kind of an all ages story, so maybe if you kind of did a color book, it might also kind of spark a little more. So I went back and recolored the original stories, which was a chore because I was trying not to redraw anything. I was like, look, I was like, no, I was like, just, I was like, it's okay. You're gonna show
Yeah.
the history of this character, and I was like, don't be a George Lucas. Don't go back and
Yeah.
redraw.
There's like dewbacks in the background now,
Oh
and
yeah,
like
dude.
yeah.
Because my buddies were all giving me shit. They're like, "Oh, bro, just let it go," because I'd be like, "I really don't like that hand, though," I'd be,
If I could just draw the hand.
right. I'm like, "I'm already
Yeah.
drawing this
It's
hand."
a
They're like,
very slippery slope.
oh God, dude, absolutely, man, absolutely. So yeah, so that I guess that was kind of the late '90s, and I really just started kept creating comics as well as illustration. Like I do a good bit of illustration. I also tutor art in the afternoons.
Nice.
I do a lot of speaking engagements, especially here in town at the local libraries. For actually 7 years, we have this really cool library uptown. It's called Imaginon. It was kind of like at the time one of a kind type place because there's actually a children's theater in this library.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's gorgeous, man. And it's literally a children's library, meaning that when you turn 18, that's it. You're not allowed
Oh,
to
okay,
come
cool.
in anymore. So
Interesting.
yeah, it's really interesting idea. So anyway, so for 7 years, I have once a week I would teach art to kids, well, comics specifically. So it was really cool, man. So I'd have this packed house of kids, and we would draw comics all night, and then do kind of a show and tell afterwards, where they would talk about their comics, what they created. And so I still do a lot of that. I'm also part of the board here in town. There's a small little convention, just kind of a suburb of Charlotte.
Mhm.
So we've been putting it on now 2 years in a row, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And I like it because I get to curate the artists. So I
Oh,
really
that's cool. That's cool.
yeah, I really try to bring in some really interesting people. It's always going to be free for artists to set up, because that's another thing a lot of people don't like to talk about. But these you know, pay to play type conventions, man, it gets pretty old pretty
Oh
quick.
yeah, even like doing cons, like just because I do art like prints and stuff that'll sell at a table. And it's
Yeah.
almost getting to the point now with the cost for tables at some of these conventions that it's
Oh,
like
dude.
it's not worth it. It's
No,
like I might
really not.
make, a few $100 instead of like 1,000 and make it worthwhile over a weekend, but it's like, man, like to just put that much work into getting everything printed to get the table costs you like
Exactly.
$600. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, and there's travel involved as well. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
100%.
only do the cons I get invited to.
Hmm.
I stopped really. The only ones I'd be willing to pay for. I've been trying to get into Cartoon Crossroads, but I only ever make it through to the waiting list. And same thing with SPX. Because the one year I did SPX, I had a blast. It was awesome. However, I only had one main comic, and then a couple minis. So I didn't make any money. I mean,
Mm.
you guys sell a lot of mini comics for $3 to make anything.
Oh yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah. I remember when I used to sell my prints for like $5 for years, and then some
right,
little
right,
girl beside me was like, "You should." She's like, "These are really nice. You should really sell them for at least 10." And I was like, "I don't know." You know what I mean? Like
right.
you're too nervous because, So it's funny. It's you have to find at least one time in like just business stuff. I heard somebody say you should never apologize for your price.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. I learned.
And I learned that too. And it's like I feel like that way with art too. It's like never apologize if someone's like whatever this is $10, and it's like whatever. But it's I just recently had in business one of these conversations with someone who was like my hourly rate is like $100 for graphic design stuff, and the guy was like, well, I don't even make that much an hour, and it's like, yes, but I don't have a 40-hour a week job with you. I'm
Exactly.
sure you make a lot more a year than I do. So like,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Like,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I upped my commissions during COVID, and honestly, no one really balked at it. I mean, so this way I do less commissions, but still make the same money, and I get that,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's the thing too. Like you said, it's like this perceived value,
Mm.
but also it's like I'm that's why I hate when people watch me draw, because
Yeah.
I'm a very quick artist.
Hmm.
So they'll be like, "Oh, that only took you an hour to do, and you're charging me $150." I'm like, "Well, yeah, absolutely, but you're
Yeah.
paying for all the years to get
Yes.
my
Yeah.
talent here,
Yeah.
guys."
Yeah. 100%.
I'm like, I'm 53 years old. I mean, I'm like, I've been drawing my whole life. I went,
Yeah.
so that's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
You're not,
Yeah.
because like a lot of the storyboard gigs I get are also because they know I'm quick.
Hmm.
So sometimes they'll reach out and they'll be like on a Friday, they're like, oh, can you board this job by Monday? And I'm like, I can, but I'm also going to charge you a lot more.
Yeah. Because that's my weekend's gone now. I've been
Right.
working on this.
I was
Yeah.
like, because they'll be like, I know you can do it. You're quick and you always have a great turnaround. I was like, yeah, I can do it. But again, I'm going to charge you for that,
Yeah. Yeah. As you should.
Right.
As you should. That's
Um,
how that's how the world works.
right.
So
So
anyway, oh, that's really cool. So Mr. Loon was kind of your entry, and then you've kind of started
yeah, and
working
then
on.
after that, I just like try to keep up every year. I did different, stories. If you look at my output, it probably seems a bit schizophrenic, because it's like, I'll go from one, like a little all ages story to like a noir story to, this or that.
That's great. I
Um,
love that because that like I don't think I think it's easy for a lot of artists. I guess indie you have a little more freedom, but a lot of artists to get shoehorned into
right.
the thing that brought them to the party, I guess, like,
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
like Alan Moore once like we just want more Watchmen stuff. And it's like, well, I just, I've told that story. I want to do something else.
Exactly.
And that sort of thing. But I mean, I love that there's a comic called Rabbi Werewolf out there that that made me very happy to see.
No, that
Uh,
that was so weird. Like my wife is Jewish, and
mhm.
she's like, there's not really any Halloweeny type stories out there that are kind of, with Jewish characters
Yeah, I
necessarily.
think the golem is like all Jewish have for like
Right.
classic like, and
Exactly.
even that story is kind of like it can be used in a horror sense, but it's not always.
Right,
But
right.
yeah.
So then I just started kind of spitballing in my head, and I just thought it'd be funny to, have this rabbi who's also this werewolf, yeah, I played up the gags, so people can laugh. So,
Of
but
course, it's great.
it was a lot of fun. I tried to, you know, kind of do it in a very different style. So, like the backgrounds are all just kind of solid colors because I was really trying to. It took me a while to get going on it because I knew I wanted something interesting with the color palette,
Mhm.
and it took me a while to figure out exactly what that was going to be. So there was a lot of tests of different like kind of color palettes and whatnot until I finally figured that kind of that blue for the most part, except for the action scenes, which were kind of switch over to red. Um, but people seem to really dig it, man. I mean, I really I sold a bunch at Heroes. I'm really fortunate that I built kind of a small audience that seeks me out every year, which is nice. To have to finally have people that do follow my work and respond well to it and things like that. Like and as any creators can hope for, right? I mean, whether it's music or whatever, you hope you can find your people that dig it, and
Yeah.
even if it's not the biggest audience, it's okay. It
Well,
gets there.
it's funny. It's just I think for most artists, it's just you're right. It's just finding your audience. Like almost there's an audience for pretty much anything and everything.
Oh yeah.
You can think of the funnest, coolest stuff, the most weirdest, goriest stuff. Like I'm a fan of a lot of different stuff. Like I like horror stuff. I like
Yeah, me too.
superhero stuff.
Absolutely.
I'm a big horror guy. I like action stuff. I love goofy stuff. I love really heartfelt stuff. Anything that kind of I feel like hits your heartstrings in any way or anything. It just makes you
Oh,
feel
dude,
something, even if it's disgust.
I
It's like,
agree.
well, that's something. That's something. I was talking about a book I read the other day. Um, so there's this guy, Grady Hendrix, who writes books. He
Okay.
wrote like My Best Friend's Exorcism and How to Sell a Haunted House. A lot of kind
Oh,
of
nice. Oh, okay.
yeah, but he wrote
Yeah.
a book called Paperbacks from Hell, and it sort of explored all of those weird horror books from like the 70s, 80s, 90s with the weird
Nice.
covers with giant crab monsters, or I
Right.
mean, all of those things you go into a used bookstore and there's mountains of them. So he kind of goes through a bunch of them and talks about some of the ones that are like, like we talked about, like diamonds in the rough. The guy
Yeah.
might have wrote one or two books and then disappeared.
Right.
But this,
Right.
but this book was really good. So he got a bunch of them and reprinted them as an imprint. So like these haven't been
Oh,
reprinted
nice.
since they came out, but now under a Paperbacks from Hell imprint, you can rebuy them and read them.
Oh, that's cool.
So there's one called Let's Go Play the Adams, which is about a group of kids that decide that while it's like a neighborhood kids that all play at one kid's family's house. They're a rich family. The parents hire a babysitter. The kids decide that if they tie the babysitter up to the bed, they don't have to do what she says and they can do whatever they want while the parents are gone. And it literally it's that simple of a premise, but it's like a Michael Henke movie, like just
Oh, wow.
like just devoid of hope and just like I kind of said it's like Michael Haneke directing Lord of the Flies. Like
Oh,
it's just
gosh.
it's dark and it goes where you expect it to and some places you don't, but there's just no hope. And you read that whole book and then by the end of it, I didn't take like breaks reading it because
Oh,
it
yeah, I
was so
bet. I
hard
bet.
that and then when I got to the end of it, I was like I put it away and I was like, oh my God. And then I was just like what a great book. I've never said it's one of the most disturbing reads of my life, but you're like, man, it made me feel this way the entire time I read it. It's
See,
a
that's awesome.
fantastic book. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, like The Road was like that for me.
Yes. Oh yeah.
I had to read it in kind of increments because I was like, man, this is some bleak shit, man.
Oh
Oh
yeah.
my God. I mean, it's obviously brilliant. The guy's obviously, I mean,
Oh yeah. Cormac McCarthy
amazing
is a
writer,
legend.
obviously.
But do you have children?
I don't know. It's
Oh,
just
it's
the
good.
two of us. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't either, but that book, if you're a parent, would hurt even
Oh,
more. I
hell
would
yeah.
say,
Oh,
especially I
God,
saw
yeah.
that movie with a friend, and we just sat quietly in the car for like half an hour before anybody said anything. Because like I think it's the most accurate depiction of if society crumbled, what the world would be like,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's why it hurts so much because you're like, oh God, this is what is going to happen.
Oh
Like,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, it's just like even like weird, disturbing movies, like Requiem for a Dream. I
Oh
love the
yeah.
movie, absolutely brilliant. I will never watch it again.
Mhm.
I don't ever need to. I don't need to see it again. I mean, again, I love the movie, but no, thank you, I'm good.
Yeah, it did its job.
Yes. Although, like I will say, now Grant Morrison
Oh yeah.
and Garth Ennis,
Huge fan of both of those.
I don't think they get enough credit for writing a lot of heart into a lot
Hmm.
of what they write. Because let's be real, especially superheroes, even the stories I like at times, they don't really write a lot of heart into some of
No.
these stories. Like, because like Jonathan Hickman and I are really close friends. We
Oh
went to high
really?
school together, and we've been friends for years.
Oh
We
nice.
talked about this before too. I said, like for instance, like when you read We Three, dude, that book crushed me, bro.
Oh yeah, me too.
No,
I still have trouble reading it. I'm a big animal
I mean,
guy. Like you just saw my
it,
cat. I have
yeah, no,
more of
it,
them
it
running
crushed me,
around.
bro.
Oh
It
man.
like, but even like Preacher, as much as it's crazy, people don't realize like the overall like
It's a love
theme
story.
is right. It has a lot of heart,
Yeah.
man. The characters have a lot, and Hitman too. I loved Hitman.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Even
A lot of
even Crossed is kind of a love story.
oh
Like
yeah,
and
right.
it's a
Yeah,
fucked
yeah,
up book, but like at the
yeah.
end you're like you see two people connecting in this insane world and you're like, yeah, like
Exactly,
when they hold hands, you're
exactly.
like, oh my God, like it hits you. Yeah, like it's you're right. Like it's easy to get lost in that profane, especially with the boys and how popular the show is.
Well, yeah, yeah, definitely,
But even that show was like, that whole thing is centered around loss and how much it breaks people.
definitely,
Like it literally breaks someone to the point that they were ready to tear the world down because of what was taken from them.
absolutely.
And
You
it's
know,
when you boil it down to those core themes, like that's what good you can put all the facade on top of your art you want.
oh yes, absolutely.
But if the end goal is something that explores a deeply human thing like loss or love or death or anything like that, like that's when you get good art. Now Morrison is, I mean, Animal Man, I think is one of the best comics ever written.
Oh
And
yeah, no,
yeah.
I love Animal Man. I love his Doom Patrol, but I'm also a sucker because I'm not a really big Silver Age person.
Mm.
It's just not for me.
Yep.
But however, except for the Doom Patrol, like
Yeah.
I loved, man. I tell you, those old stories are insane. That's why when Grant was doing his run, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is so crazy," I'm like, "Yeah, have you read the original?" Because I'm like,
Yeah.
he is totally ripping off a lot of, and he said it himself. He's like, "Oh, dude, I love that stuff. That's what I'm really, people forgot how bizarre that shit was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, obviously he took it, more so, but it's still crazy shit, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm not like, I feel
It's
bad
it's
because
hard to read. I have a lot of those omnibuses, but like I read the Thor one, I pulled it out and I started
oh
reading it,
yeah,
and I got to like
Stan Lee,
I don't know, episode 18, issue 18 or 19 of this big omnibus, and I'm like, oh my God. Like it's
yeah,
just such a slow drag.
yeah, I
And like
can't.
at the time period, it was, I'm sure, innovative and different and cool,
Right,
but
right.
like it's just very cookie cutter almost every episode. There's some
Oh God,
guy,
yeah, I can't.
Thor wants to tell Jane that he's Thor, or he loves
Oh,
her, and Odin's like, no. And then it's like that for like 40 issues. Like it's just
right.
insane.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
it's a
And all the
lot.
exposition, man. The
Yeah.
exposition is also what gets me. And just some of the dialogue, I'm just like, oh God, guys, come on, man. You're killing me. But I'm glad for the people who like that stuff, like the
Oh
older
yeah.
movies, all that stuff. But like I said, for me personally, yeah, it doesn't speak to me in any way,
Mm,
And I guess because like my formative years were the 80s, so
mm.
that's like when my teen years were coming up.
So you must have been right
So
into like Sandman and all that stuff.
oh, dude, yeah, dude. I remember when Sandman came out, the first issue, and I was working at a comic book store at the time because I was in college by then, and I was helping run a comic shop. So, luckily my boss was really cool. He was really into a lot of indie shit because he's actually the person who turned me on to Ted McKeever. I hadn't actually
Oh,
seen Ted
nice.
McKeever stuff before, and he showed me, Eddie Current first, and it blew my fucking mind, dude. I was like, oh man, my God, this is like insane stuff. It's
Oh
like,
yeah.
and of course, then I went back and got Transit and all the other stuff he did afterwards, but. So anyway, Sandman came in, and I really didn't know much about it, obviously. So I take it home, and I loved the first issue. Don't get me wrong, but like I always tell people that I try to get into Sandman. I'm like, give it the first 6 issues. Like the first trade paperback, he's still finding like kind of what he's trying to do with the stories
Mhm.
yet.
Yeah.
Because I found a lot of my friends they didn't respond right away to the first trade, especially.
Really.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I'm not sure, Herc. I'm like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do. I said, but give it a couple more issues, and then definitely by the second trade, I'm telling you, I was like, if you don't like it, I'd be surprised. But
Yeah.
I was like, just try it, But once they get there, they're like, oh yeah, yeah. Now I see where he's going. Now I see what he's trying to create, and he's really kind of getting into the meat, and potatoes, I guess, of it,
Yeah.
So, because like there's certain books. That's why I hate when people are like, "Oh, if someone doesn't read comics, you should give him Watchmen." Watchmen is the last fucking book I'd ever given him. I love the book, but I'm sorry, an average person who doesn't understand the superhero tropes and things
Yeah.
like that, they're not going to respond the same way. If I'm going to give them Alan Moore stuff, I'd give them either A Small Killing, V for Vendetta first,
Yeah.
and then they can go into
Even
Watchmen
From
later.
Hell, like From Hell's a pretty
Oh, dude,
accessible
yeah,
book
From
too.
Hell,
Yeah. Like,
absolutely.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even the Swamp Thing stuff, I think,
Yeah.
is more.
That one hooked me from the start. I remember reading
Oh,
that
dude,
first issue.
me too.
I
Oh,
think I
dude.
was one of the first comics that I ever actively laughed out loud when I was reading. It's like that first page when they think he's dead, and then they
Right,
figure out that he's a plant thing that thinks he's Alan Holland. He never
right,
was, or Alec
right,
Holland. And then like the old guy like goes in his office and looks, and the husk is gone, and he walks into his office and he sees Swamp Thing reading the report and
right.
realizing that he is, understanding that he is just a plant that thinks he was a man.
Exactly.
You never was a man. And then like the guy's like looks at him, he's like, "Did you read the report?" And it's just yes in one word. He goes, "Did you
Right.
like it?" Yeah, and then he's just like, and then he just rips the table away and starts
Yeah.
running after him, and you're like, it was just so funny. Like, did you like it? Like,
And you make a good point.
yeah.
I don't really think people realize that how much humor Alan Moore
Mm.
can bring to some of his stories, because a
Yeah.
lot of times people I think of him as more of a serious writer. But when you read some of the other stuff he's done, and you're like, oh no, he's very witty, guys.
Oh yeah.
He's his stuff's
League
pretty.
of Extraordinary Gentlemen has a lot of funny stuff in it.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And
Yep.
like Tom Strong did, and his
Oh
Supreme
God, yeah.
stuff had lots of humor in it.
Me
His
too.
Supreme stuff's fantastic.
Absolutely. I wish the art was better. I
Yeah.
don't really respond well to a lot of that art on Supreme, unfortunately. Again, it's solid artist, just it doesn't
Yeah.
speak to me,
Was that
like when I
that
talk
wasn't the
about
guy that
art.
did Tom Strong? Was it Chris Sprouse? Was that it?
No, that he did it a couple issues later, but early on, I think
Oh,
it
right.
was
It was very
Image.
imagey. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah,
never cared for that style,
yeah.
honestly. For me, it just doesn't really speak to me. And even Church, I mean, even Dave Sim, as much as he became an asshole, I will still give people High Society and Church and State and say these are some of the best things that comics can be
Yes.
all day long, all day long. It's sad that later on some of the
Yeah, I actually
Yeah.
I have fond memories of him just because he came out to do when he was doing this thing was like the last comic signing.
Oh, nice.
He came around here and he was doing a signing at the comic shop in Halifax, and I gave him a copy of my comic and he said some nice things about it. So it was like, it was a
Yeah.
nice moment, but then you kind of realize as time like he would only uh correspond through actual letters. So you had to write a letter and
Oh,
send it to
wow.
him.
That's
And
crazy.
I remember I asked him if it was okay if I used something he said and promote the book, and he said no. So I was like, I was like, all right, fair enough. At least worth asking.
Right.
But
Right.
but yeah. Well, do you have like because your style of art specifically is kind of
Yeah.
yeah. And you said earlier about the word cartoony. I always find that funny about like because there is a differential some people use between cartoonist and artist.
Right.
And I've talked to people that like I just actually in a previous episode I had the gentleman that works on like the mini Marvels. He worked on that mini Marvel
Oh
stuff.
yeah. Yeah.
He does
Yeah. I love
G-Man
it.
and all that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
Chris, I can't say his name correctly, but yeah.
yeah, it's
I
oh
don't want to
god,
mess
it'll
with
come to me in a minute.
it.
But
Oh, no.
yeah, he's a very cool guy, and like his style is kind of this cartoonish way, and we kind of got into a talk about like Fred Hembeck and other people from the past that
Oh
like
yeah.
had those sort
Yeah.
of styles, and even
Yeah.
like Chris Ware who does like these incredibly dark human stories with
Right.
these seemingly simple art, but if you look at any of his books, like if you read the entire book, there's usually
Right.
incredibly beautiful, expansive graphic design
Yep.
stuff
Absolutely.
all throughout
Absolutely.
that that gets people kind of miss. It's funny how in that Sabrina book, like that style of art is very
Yep.
simplistic, but that story is incredibly dark and incredibly relevant.
Absolutely.
So do you have other inspirations or people that you keep an eye out for that way, or
Oh yeah. Absolutely, man. I mean, I guess it's so funny because as an artist, like I have a lot of people that kind of roam around in the back of my head, but I
Mhm.
don't know necessarily that it comes out in my work
Mhm.
necessarily because I worked very hard at trying to create a style that is unique to my voice, I
Yeah.
guess, if that makes sense. But that
Interesting.
said,
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I've always worked really hard at, I wanted to be me. I never wanted
Yeah.
to draw on anyone else. I always wanted to be me, and that goes for really most aspects of my life,
Yeah.
But that said, I mean, Matt Wagner, both as an artist, but also as a writer, the stuff he created. I mean, reading Mage as a teen dude, and then when he finally reveals that it's King Arthur, and I'm just like, well, how did I not get this? You know what I mean? And then I go back to read the following issues, and you're like, oh, it's all right there, it's all
It's
right
all
there.
there. Yeah.
And then of course his Grendel shit. I mean,
Yeah.
the expansive world that he created, um, it was just amazing. And of course, outside, kind of comic, I guess, adjacent is Jim Henson. Jim Henson for
Nice.
me is probably my biggest, both as a writer, but as a comedic writer. A lot of his, humor and timing. Absolutely. Roger Langridge. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a British creator. He worked on the Muppets for a while. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yes.
that said, his indie shit is amazing. I first saw his work in the late 80s. And it's so funny because we're friends now. And one year we were hanging out having a couple of drinks, and I said, Roger, I know you're gonna dismiss me, but I said it's still pretty surreal hanging out with you because I said I've always considered you like one of my influences.
Hmm.
And he's very soft spoken, like British dude.
Yeah.
So he's just like, oh, Herc, come on. I was like, no, I was like, no. So I was like, it's kind of surreal that we're actually friends now because you know, again, I considered you one of my influences, but I guess early influence that always held true still is Sergio Aragonés.
Oh, one of the nicest
Um,
people I've ever met.
Oh, dude, I finally got a chance to meet him, man. Oh my God, I can't even tell you. I don't normally geek out much because I've met a lot of people. I mean, hell, I partied with Skid Row back in the day. So,
Nice, nice.
and I'm like, they're just people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. Oh,
But when I met
I've
him, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I've told the story 1,000 times in the show, but just I met him at a Comic-Con, and him and Stan Sakai were beside each other at a table,
Yeah, same thing
and
with me.
I gave him my comic, and they both told me to come back the next day, and I did, and they'd read it overnight, and they had a bunch of tips, and it was just like they went above and beyond, and it was very
Oh,
sweet. I always remember that.
it was similar to me, man. At that point, I had been doing Inktovers, and I would collect my little Inktober stories every year. So they were like these little square books, And at the time, I think I had 4 of them, and then I had some other comics too. So I gave them to Sergio, and I was about to walk away, but he's like, "Oh, no, no, wait," because it was before the con started. So he's like looking through them, and he's like laughing his ass off at some of the hijinks of the Inktober stories, especially. So man, I was like, man, that's just really nice that, he did that, because he didn't have to. I mean, he could have just
Yeah,
thrown him in the garbage after I walked away,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, but no, dude, he took the time and he's just like laughing and he's just talking about different, little scenes in the book and whatnot. So anyway, I just thought it was really cool, and again, it was neat to meet him because he was also, Mad would collect his little collections into these little paperback books. They weren't very
Oh
big.
yeah, yeah. I have a
I
few
think
of
they were
those.
like $1.50, at the time,
Yep.
whatever, $2. And he was probably one of the first like artists that I really, really, because I mean, even before a lot of the Marvel stuff, I had been seeing his work in Mad and whatnot. So um he was just somebody I really admired a lot in what he can do with his economy of line, but also his imagination and what he would create with these worlds. Like, of course, later on when Gru came out, of course, then I was just like, my God, he puts all this stuff in here,
Mhm.
everything, every little bit. And it just, yeah, so for me, he's still definitely one of those guys in there, in my, brain pattern. Of course, Paul Grist, another
Nice.
dude I've been following for years, Jim Woodring, Rick Geary. Um, I feel like I respond a lot to people who have a very distinct, I guess, style.
Hmm.
Mignola, obviously,
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
I mean, it's funny because when I was working in the comic book store when Rubber Blanket 1 came out,
Hmm.
and you know, it blew my mind absolutely, But of course, all the superhero bros came in, and I was trying to show them. I'm like, look, this is new Mazzucchelli. And they were just like, "What the fuck is this?" I mean, they were like, "What is this?" I'm like, they're like, "No, no." They did not respond to it at all, man. Like, and
Wow.
because they were so used to like, Daredevil and then of course Batman year one later
Yeah.
on.
But it's
Um,
weird because like there's lots of examples of like off different artists in mainstream comics. Like
oh heck
Arkham
yeah.
Asylum is a really strange comic to look at if you don't know. You know
Yes,
what I mean? Like, and that's a
absolutely.
huge book. I always quote when I talk to like kids about, because I've done a few things where I talk to kids about making art and stuff, and I've always said that like Humberto Ramos is a very strange artist,
Yep.
you know what I mean? But he made
Yep.
Spider-Man comics and they're great comics.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
like it's just because it's your style is different doesn't mean there's a home for it. But
Right. Right. Right.
so
But no, so yeah, definitely, and of course, even new people, I meet new people at conventions and just new books that come out and, with new creators that speak to me as well. Um, I feel like, as you can see, I have a problem and I buy a lot of
oh
books.
no, don't apologize to me
That's
about
like my
that.
only vice, honestly. That's the only thing I really spend money on outside of like, traveling and like the house.
Yeah, well that's you gotta have something.
Oh
I
yeah.
once read a quote that said um what is it said? Buying books and reading books are two very different hobbies.
Oh yeah, no.
And I thought, because I've been trying to read a lot more, because I always loved reading, but you get busy in life and it gets away from
Oh
you.
yeah,
But I've been making a
absolutely.
concentrated effort to read more and try to get a book done every week or so, and
Right.
then sneak some graphic novels in between the new book just to get some
Yeah.
stuff in, and also single comics, which I still buy a few of. But
Oh yeah,
it's
me too, dude. I have a
yeah,
shitload still.
oh
Like
yeah.
like this whole shelf and that whole shelf are unread graphic novels.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure my library, which is a big room, shelves all the walls
Yeah,
full of
yeah,
books,
that's how it
full
goes
of
all the way
books,
around.
and I'm
Yeah,
sure
because
I've read 30% of them.
when we bought the house, that was always my dream, and it was funny because I wound up filling them up. So then during COVID, I called the same guy. He's done some work for us in the house and whatnot, who built the shelves. So then my wife was like, call John up and see if he can take your closet doors off and put shelves there. So I asked him, I was like, can you do, how much is it going to cost? So that's what he did. So my closet's right there, but it looks like bookshelves. So it
Nice,
opens up in
that's
the closet
awesome.
behind it. But I'm already out of space. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
me too. I gotta
Um,
pare it down a bit. My dad was a carpenter, is a carpenter, and
oh, that's
he
awesome.
came over and helped me build them, and so it's cool. There's
I
something we
wish I
did
was
together.
handy, dude.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. I'm not
I,
not
I,
that well.
I know I could barely freaking hang a picture, man.
Yeah. Dad was like, "Well, you might want to paint these," and I'm like, "I don't know. It seems I said I'll stain them, but that's about as far as I went." So,
Yeah,
and it's like it's a room. It's probably about half the size of this room, and
yeah.
I got a little chair in the middle and everything. But I remember when I was staying it that night, I'm very much of a like I like to get stuff done out of my
Yeah, me
headspace.
too.
Once it's
Me
done,
too.
I'm done. So I started
Me too.
staining. I was up to like 3 a.m. staining the whole room, and it was just like a small room with like a not a big window. So like by the end of it, I was just like sitting, like
Oh, no doubt, dude.
you got the fumes. You're just like, oh man,
Definitely,
that's beautiful. Well,
definitely.
what's new? What's coming out next?
Well, I'm doing, I wanted to show people that I can also do kind of, I guess, I don't know, more actiony type stuff. So
Huh?
I got this like weird kind of mummy wolf looking character. So I'm just working on a fight comic. It doesn't have a name yet because I haven't actually named the character yet. But so I'm working on that, and then I'm
Oh
also
man,
working. Oh,
you just gave me a great idea for something. I'll
oh,
explain it, but
nice.
so go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah, he fights like this big alligator creature, crocodile creature,
that's awesome.
in a subway station. So I got my work cut out for me. But
That's sweet.
I always try to push myself. I don't ever want to become like stagnant as an artist. So I figure every book I do, I try to do something a little different that might be outside my comfort zone a
Hmm.
little. Well, just because again, I want to keep making sure I push myself as an artist.
Hmm.
Because even color work, I mean, like a lot of the gang that, on Thursday nights, they're like, man, your color sense has really gotten so much better, as you've been. I said, well, I really work hard at it. I really study comics, that the coloring I like, movies, color palettes and things like that. So I really am doing my best to constantly be growing. So I'm doing that, and then I am pulling a Lucas, and
Oh, you're going back? You're
oh
going
yeah,
back?
because I have a comic
The
that was really
special
well
edition?
received. Yeah, because I needed to reprint it, and it's called Last Cigarette.
Hmm.
And I did it for an anthology, and sadly, at the time, I was under a time crunch,
Mm-hmm.
and they only gave me, I think 9 pages or 10 pages, and this little noir story about this retired Greek cop, and he lives on on a Greek island, and he has to find this missing girl. And everyone really loves it, and they still talk about it even to this day. So when I was going back, I really wanted to expand the story a little bit because again, at the time, I felt like I had to really cram a lot into those pages,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really feel like some of the scenes really should have kind of had a little more time to breathe a little bit. So then when I started writing kind of a new beginning and kind of a new middle to expand, I was like, well, I don't draw like this at all anymore. So I really was like, I might pull Lucas just this one time and actually redraw the whole story, and
Nice.
make it, 24 page, kind of
Mm-hmm.
let it breathe a little more. Especially once I went back to Greece after so long, I got a chance to take a lot of reference shots
Oh,
too.
nice, beautiful.
Yeah, because like I asked my cousins to send me reference shots back when I was doing the book, which is now is probably like 15 years ago now, 16 years
Mm-hmm.
ago. They sent me like all cool shit, and I'm like, no, no, man, I don't think you understand. I'm like when you walk into the market, I was like, I need shots like that,
Yeah,
like
just the street, just the street.
right. I'm like a street, or
It's
like a
like a
little
beautifully centered
right.
artistic photo.
I was like, I'm not, you're not getting what I'm trying to go here for here. So like when I went back, I was able to
Yeah,
like, okay, I was like, this is like, this will be a great for the scene for, when he's in the cafe, and this would be a cool scene for when he's on the water and all this.
I love that.
So I,
That's awesome. It's
on that.
it's a
So
level of authentism to work that a lot of people go the extra mile to do. I mean, you
yeah,
can make a street
exactly.
look like a street, but it's nice when you actually try to make it look like Greece.
Exactly.
So
Right. Especially, that's why like when my wife found out that I come from revolutionaries, there in fact I have my great grandfather and uncle, they have Wikipedia pages.
oh,
Um yeah, and there's statues of them and whatnot. Yeah, because when the Ottomans, were trying to take over Greece and they were
mm,
gonna push all the Greeks to be a diaspora, and all
yep.
leave Greece. Well, my family was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So they they fought against the Ottomans, and in fact, my one great relative, the Ottomans hated him so much that even after the war, he's like old man chilling out in his like villa, just the end of his days, just kind of relaxing. They hired one of his servants to shank him in his sleep. They hated him so much.
Wow.
Yeah. So she's like, "Oh, you should totally do a graphic novel." I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You know how hard historical graphic novels are?" I was like,
Come
the amount
on,
of
it could be like an accurate 300.
oh
It could
god, dude.
be,
I mean,
yeah,
but like one of my best friends, he's like a history buff. So
yeah.
like his comics are like very like he very well researched, so like I can just hear him in the back of my head, like he's like, well, technically that shaft that they were using to fight the Ottomans doesn't look like that, Herc, and I mean I can
Yeah.
just hear him in the back
Oh
of my ear,
shit. Yeah.
exactly, because he's like he's a great person though when you are working on something and you're like,
Yeah.
hey bro, I need what kind of tank did they use back in this battle, or whatever, and
Mhm.
he'll be like, oh yeah, this is what they used, they're like go into all this like detail about this different weaponry and whatnot. But yeah, because he's very old school, style in the sense that he's an amazing painter, like
Mm.
a portraiture,
No,
painter.
beautiful.
Oh yeah. In fact, when we got married, he did this gorgeous piece for us as a wedding gift
Oh, that's sweet.
that we have downstairs.
That's awesome.
Um, oh yeah, I get on his case all the time because he doesn't really do a lot of work anymore, sadly. But I'm like, man, I was like, dude, if I can paint like you, dude, I'd be cranking them out,
Painting is a crazy, like it's beautiful, but it's such a
Oh
time
yeah.
constraint. Like
Oh god, yeah.
I talked to J.K. Woodward, who does a lot of like these
Oh yeah.
photorealistic
Yeah.
paintings. Yeah,
Yeah.
and his stuff's beautiful, but man, like the
Definitely.
amount of work that goes into all those, especially do like he does a lot of covers, but like to do full comics, which he's done a
Oh
few of, it's
dude.
like, oh my God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially because it was funny because when he did the piece for us, a lot of people were like, "Oh, not artist people, like regular Joes, they
Mhm.
were like, "Oh, does he do commissions?" I'm like, "Yeah, but keep in mind, something of this quality, he's probably going to charge you a grand."
Yeah.
And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I mean, I
It'll
mean,
probably
hell,
take him like a week or two to do it. Like,
exactly,
yeah.
exactly." And like my other best friend, his dad, he's actually an old school painter, like those big like 10
Oh yeah,
feet,
yeah, 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 yeah.
that you
Nice.
that you see at universities, and he's like, it's 10 grand a sitting, you
Yeah.
know. Um, I'm just like, well, what did you expect? I was like, you're not getting this for $10, you know.
Yeah, I
You know,
know.
I'm
Well, that's
like,
another struggle too. Is just like we talked about, I guess, coming back full circle to valuing your art. Like people,
right,
some people, they're like, you just sit there and draw it. That's not nothing. It's like, well, it's not nothing. I can do that. Can you?
exactly,
It's like,
exactly,
it's like asking your
exactly,
mechanic, being like, well, your mechanic only takes him 20 minutes to fix whatever's wrong in your car, but he
right,
charges like, a few $100s. It's like, can you
exactly.
fix it? Like, if you can, you should.
You know,
So.
it's like a musician. It's like, if you think you can pick up a guitar and make it sound like, this dude that you love, it's like, then do it. But you can't, because it
Yeah.
takes time, effort and talent, of course, because that's another thing people don't want to talk about. Not everyone has the aptitude,
Mhm.
I'm sorry. They just don't,
No, that's true.
it's just not in, and that's okay. I mean, there's no shame in that, um, but that's something, I think a lot of people don't really, that's why this AI shit, let's be real, you
Mhm.
know, I'm like, yeah, you're not an artist,
Oh,
you're
yeah,
pumping
it's
some garbage in there. I was like, anymore, like, I have a good friend of mine. He's an amazing guitar player. And when he was recording albums, especially like in the 90s, he'd run his guitar through like a MIDI system, so it actually sounded like a piano. But
mhm.
he was under no false pretenses to think that he could sit down and be a pianist. No,
Yeah,
absolutely not. He
yeah,
did not know how to play piano.
yeah,
Play guitar, awesome. But just like you're not a chef because you use a fucking microwave.
yeah. No, you're
I
100% right.
mean,
The AI thing is very interesting to me because I once heard this quote that said like, you know, I can't wait till AI gets figured out so they can take care of all the backbreaking labor jobs so I can focus on art. And then it's like
right,
the big companies like, hey, we got AI to figure out art, so now you can go back and focus on your backbreaking labor job.
right,
It's like,
right,
shouldn't the computers be doing the stuff we don't want to do? Let us do the
right.
art. Like it's
Exactly.
and also it's not created in a vacuum. Like it's just like a meat grinder. It just takes everything that
Right.
was made before, grinds it up and makes something new.
Exactly.
Um,
It's
you
not
know,
unique in any
no, it's
way.
not unique and it's not original. It
No,
wouldn't
God,
exist
no.
without all the stuff that had come before it that is programmed into it.
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, I see it as a useful tool to some things. Like if somebody sends me a file that's like in all caps and I need to make it uppercase and lowercase, it's nice to drop it in there and say, rewrite this in uppercase and lowercase, like
Right.
basic shit like that. But like when it comes to
Right.
actually creating stuff of merit or substance, it's far from. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
try people who knows what it'll look like in 10 years time, but try to get it to come up with anything original now, and it doesn't. It's just
Oh God,
not
no.
that I mean original is a term that, but even anything that has heart or seems unique, it's just the same garbled shit.
Right. Absolutely.
And it's insane to me that it's gotten to a point that you have to even like argue with studios or go on strike to make sure they don't have scripts written by AI or reprogram. Like the idea that like, one thing they're talking about was like background performers. Like, you work for one day, they
Right.
scan your body, and they never need you again. So you get
I
paid
know.
for one day of work, and then they could use you in the background for 100 days and never pay you for any of that. It's crazy.
And I would never sign, that's one thing, I haven't done a lot of published work in recent years, not because people haven't been interested in my work. They have, but when they send me these contracts, bro, and I read these contracts, I'm like, yeah, right here, it says that you want, part rights to my character, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, but you're not giving me anything
Mhm.
for it other
Yeah.
than printing my book,
Yes.
And I'm like, yeah, that's not really a good,
Yeah.
balance
Well,
there, I
I
can print my
mean,
own books. I'm fine, I
yeah.
mean, I'm not rich or anything, but I mean,
Yeah.
I can print my own books. I if that's all you're offering me, that's not enough. I mean,
Yeah.
like for instance, like like my friend Jonathan, it's like, yeah, bro. He's like, I own all that stuff because when the studio comes, I sign a deal that says they can make a movie within 3 or 4 years, and if they don't, all that shit comes right back to me, and I
Yeah.
can sell it again,
Yeah.
and so forth forever,
But
because
guys,
I own it.
but guys like
Yeah,
him working in like, that's the interesting thing to me is like I'm a big fan of Jim Starlin, and like,
yeah,
he
right,
said famously he got paid more to be an extra in Infinity War than he did for them using Thanos in all of those movies.
right,
Like, because like when you work in that sandbox as Hickman too, I assume a lot of
right.
interesting stuff he brought to the multiversal Doctor Doom storylines. I'm sure that's going to
Definitely,
be used coming up.
definitely.
And I doubt they say that the like Marvel will give you what they call hush money essentially to
Yeah,
like say thank you for what you did, but it's not that much, not compared to how much the
I do.
movies make.
Now, because
So
that's another thing I think people, don't realize, it's like I have plenty of friends who've gotten their stuff option. He's like, they're like, dude, they give you maybe 10, 15 grand for the
Yeah.
option.
Yeah.
Now you'll make more, absolutely, if it gets further down
Yeah.
the line.
But that's a big if.
You know?
That's a big if.
Exactly, but that's a very big if.
Yeah.
Because I mean, like I just got the last issue of Peep Show, Joe Matt, and he was talking, a little bit about the HBO deal, he was potentially having to, do his comics. So, I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but,
Joe Mad?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
from Battle Chasers, that guy?
No, you're thinking of Joe Madura.
Yeah.
No, Joe Matt, it was a Canadian cartoonist. He did a book called Peep Show. I mean, he's
Right.
doing some other things too, but he sadly he passed away. Not I guess a couple years ago now.
Oh,
But I guess,
I do 100%
yeah.
know who that is. Sorry. Yes, yes,
No, no,
yes.
no,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. Yeah, but they finally put out the last issue that he had basically died working on it. So, and then it was neat because Chester Brown wound up inking the last like 3 or 4 pages.
His style is very reminiscent of Brown, absolutely.
So, but anyway, it was neat to kind of hear him talking about, the HBO deal and things like that and whatnot, and trying to work with these producers that had no idea of, how to even understand this character or these comics, but that's one thing. Yeah, dude. I mean, I remember even just some of these kind of mid-tier, companies and what they were offering me to draw for some of their stories. And it was like $60 a page, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, dude, I don't need the like one of my friends got kind of, on me. They're like, yeah, but once you get in and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, but once I get in, I'm working they wanted me to work on licensed stuff. They kind of wanted to draw and model. And then I'm like, so one, it's not really me out there at all.
Yeah.
It's not my style in any way.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they're not really paying me a lot. So
Yeah.
I said, so what benefit other than potentially having a rapport with the editor, maybe? But I said that wasn't enough for me. I said, it just wasn't, and again, if I'm going to publish, like I just pitched a couple things recently. I sent in my Mr. Loon book to a couple smaller companies. And then I also pitched a Rabbi Werewolf book as well. Although I think that might be a little hard sell right now, sadly, with everything that's going on. But anyway, so we'll see. I'd be interested to see if, I'm not opposed to putting out stuff from like my good friend here in town, Jeremy Massey. He's got a great book coming out soon from Dark Horse next month. In fact, I think you would love it. It's called Holler, Holler, and it's really neat, man. It's kind of like semi-autobiographical, and it deals a lot with kind of high school, garage bands.
Nice.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah. I tell you, I know he always is like, oh shit, I've heard.
Oh, I love the art. It's beautiful.
Oh yeah, dude. Yeah, Jeremy is legit. He's an absolutely amazing artist. He has a great voice. I really hope Holler comes out and people really talk about it, because I've been obviously fortunate to see him working on it every week at Sketch Group. So it's just it's just a great story. It really, I feel like it would really speak to a lot of people just about growing up. Also growing up with kind of a religious, upbringing, but then also wanting to play punk music and having, like your church and your family
reconciling that.
A lot of shit, there's a lot of really funny things in there, just about that. But if you get a chance, like I said, it comes out from Dark Horse. In fact, a couple weeks from now, I believe.
Awesome.
It's well worth it if you ever want to have him on your show.
I would love to. I would love to. But
he's a funny ass guy, dude. I mean, just like I love him to death. I'm so fortunate. When I started the sketch group, I really only started because I moved into the town. I didn't know anyone. I don't know how to make friends as an adult.
That's tough. That's tough.
You
get a little set in your ways when you get older, and it's tougher to find people that you really like. I people say I collect people. I'm kind of like because I do a lot of things around town. I generally like putting friend groups together and and meeting people, because sometimes it's just to find someone that's into the shit you're into. It's tough. So if you find one, you're like, oh yeah, you're part of the circle now. Get over here.
Exactly. And believe me, it's not. There'll be times in sketch group that we get heated about like art. Because there was like one of our friends was talking shit about Daniel Clowes, and of course,
What?
like
Fuck that
and
guy. Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah, me
My
too.
buddy Henry Udy. In fact, if you've never seen any of my buddy Henry Udy's work, you would really love it. The guy, I'm telling you, man, he's probably my wife's favorite artist, like probably more so than me even.
Really?
Because we have so much of his original art on our wall, but also his comics are just he's he's witty, man, and you don't
Yeah.
really find a lot of people who actually are witty that actually will make you laugh out loud when you're reading their work.
Awesome.
And he's one of those dudes, like John Allison, who did Giant Days, and well, a lot of stuff, but he's the same way too, man. Like,
Mhm.
plus I love British humor anyway.
Oh yeah,
But
me too.
man, that dude, he will literally make me laugh out loud. I mean, I'll be reading one of his comics, and I'm just like, my wife will be like, "What are you laughing about?" I'm like, "Oh my God, this thing is hysterical!" Like his dialogue is funny, just everything, and you don't see that a lot, like in
Mhm.
comics, especially where it makes you laugh, like
Yeah.
actually laugh, like
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
wow, that's just funny as
If
shit.
a
And
book or a comic makes me do that, it's great.
oh
It's
yeah,
fantastic.
definitely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
That's awesome. Yeah, no,
Anyway, I don't mean
you
to,
mentioned a lot of cool people. I'll happily talk to all of them. So,
oh yeah, no doubt,
getting people on
yeah,
the show is thankfully Davin, who reached out to you, is pretty accessible with that. But
yeah,
yeah, no,
no doubt.
I'm happy. All of those guys. If you want to put in my way, I'll be happy to
Yeah,
set up
I
times to
will.
time.
Yeah, I think especially Jeremy, because with his new book coming out, I know he's very anxious that
Yeah, awesome.
find an audience as
It looks
well.
very 90s too, which is I'm
Oh, dude,
39. You asked my age earlier. I'm 39. I
yeah,
just turned 39, so I'm a 90s kid by far. So,
you will love it
yeah,
because it's a period piece.
yeah.
So it takes place in the 90s because he was a kid in the 90s. Because I'm older. I'm probably one of the older of
Oh yeah, that's good. You're the sage.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yes,
I don't know
yes.
about sage, but yeah, I am the old man.
Yeah,
I'm the old
just
man.
sitting in the robe at the front of the top
That's
of the
right, exactly.
yeah.
They call me the Godfather.
Yeah, no, yeah. You bring in the
Um,
comic, you
yeah,
flip through
exactly.
it's give them
Yeah,
the make a
exactly.
little Christ symbol over it, and they go on their day with the
I'm
comic.
like, kiss my ring. I'm like,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But yeah, so and that's another thing too that I love about our group on Thursdays, especially because everyone has a very different style, very unique style. They, and very different in the things that they like. Obviously, we have common ground on some things, of course. But it's just neat, And it was neat also because we were fortunate, we got a lot of young people that would come, and then they became, older, and then they went off to college to, do cool shit, and to, see that growth in someone is really neat too.
Mhm.
And they definitely push my ass for sure. Like I'll bring stuff, and they're honest. That's another thing I like about, the gang. We're honest without being assholes about it, obviously, because I remember I always give my friend Dave a hard time. His name's Dave Demir. He did some stuff for Oni for quite in the early, I guess, 90s and
Mhm.
late early 2000s too. But anyway, he did some stuff, in the field. But anyway, the first time I ever met him, he was set up next to me at a convention. And keep in mind, I don't know this dude like at all.
Yeah.
He's sitting there. I'm sitting here. I get a commission, a Starman commission, and that's actually one of the superhero stories I actually do love that run.
Yeah, Alex
Um,
Robinson, right? No, not
oh
Alex
yeah,
Robinson. Sorry, James Robinson.
yes,
Yeah,
James
yeah,
Robinson.
yeah.
So anyway, I was working out the sketch, and I wasn't quite sure about where I was going with it. So I was like, since he's sitting next to me, I was like, "What do you think, Dave?" And he looks at it, he's like, "No, man, you can do better." And I always give him so much shit all these years later because I said, so many people wouldn't say that though.
Yeah.
So many people were just like, "Oh yeah, it's cool."
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No,
Um,
that's a good
uh,
a
you
good
know,
partner.
but yeah, exactly. And my wife is that way too, being an artist and a designer. I'll be working on something, in the other room, and she'll come in after about an hour or two, whatever, and I'll show her to her, and she's always like looking at it, and I can always tell when she's not feeling it. And I'm just like, just say it, just spit it out, and she'll be like, well, I've seen you do a lot better or whatever. Um, and since she designs all my books now, and of course, that's why they look so good, but
Mhm.
she always has these great ideas. Sometimes I'm always like, yeah, I don't think you I don't think my skill level is quite where your idea is.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
I was like,
I
'cause
will
like
endeavor to try.
Yeah, like when I collected the Inktober book, she's like, "Oh, you really should do a wraparound." And she's like, if you're gonna call it the omnibus, it'd be really neat if they're driving like a Volkswagen bus, and it wraps around the cover. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, I'm like, it's a great idea. Don't get me wrong, it was, and it turned out awesome.
Yeah,
but it really worked me to figure out how to get this wraparound cover with this bus.
That's awesome.
That
That's
around
awesome.
it.
So your editor lives in your house. It's amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, no, yeah, because she does graphic design. That's actually her. Her.
Oh, cool. Right on. Yeah.
Yeah, she does a lot of store graphic type work and things like that. Set up stores and things and whatnot, as well as print design and what.
Nice, beautiful.
Like but she's also an amazing painter and a sculptor. So I'm really just fortunate. We met online. Through one of the apps. And,
Nice.
yeah, she always gives me shit though, because when we met, in her profile, she says that she was a graphic designer. So she's like, "That's probably why you reached out to me, because you said I was a graphic designer. You needed someone to work on your books."
Now we're married. You're locked in. Yeah, I got you.
Exactly.
I got you.
Like, yeah. Because she does my lettering and stuff too. So.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it's just she always gives me shit. She's like, "That's why you reach out." I was like, "Actually, no." I was like, "You know why I really reached out? Besides, obviously, she's a cutie, but
yeah."
You had a quote from The Cure, which is one of my favorite bands. So that's actually why I reached out originally, because I was like, "Oh, she likes The Cure. Let me reach out."
Yeah, the rest just fell into place.
Exactly.
Oh, that's lovely. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Rick. This is awesome chatting with you, man. This is a blast.
No, thank you. I really appreciate it. I hope I didn't ramble on too
much.
No,
this is what this should be. Like, this is whenever people are like approach the show, it's funny because sometimes you'll chat with people and they really expect it to be like I have a preset level of questions I need to ask you, and it's more like just walking through your life and getting your your insight and all your stuff. And this is perfect. Man. I think this did the trick.
I really appreciate it, and I hope we'll keep in touch, and I'll definitely send some people your way, man.
Yeah, and send me any cool books you're reading. You sound like I feel sometimes I do this show. I like there's an impetus when you connect with people on these when you're like, oh man, this guy's cool. Like we should talk about more stuff, and then you're like, you don't want to bother folks, but I'm like, send me stuff, and I'll send anything I come across.
Yeah, no, definitely, because like as you can see, I definitely have a lot.
Awesome, great. Well, I'll do the same.
Well, brother, thank you so much. Let me know when I guess it comes out, so I can promote it as well.
Absolutely.
So thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thanks a lot, Herc.
Take care, brother.
All right, bye-bye. There it is, my conversation with Herc. Great talk, great conversation, really cool guy. And really fun. I love, I talked about sometimes on the show, but when you really connect with someone and the conversation just flows easily, and Herc was definitely one of those. So big thanks to him for being on the show. Big thanks to Davin, our guest acquisition officer, for bringing him in and putting us together, because that was a great talk, a great conversation. I'm looking very forward to checking out some of his books, especially Rabbi Werewolf. That sounds like a blast. I'm super down for that. All right, so join us again in one week's time. It's funny, man, how it gets stuck in your head. Like, I used to do one every 2 weeks, and then back in December, almost a year ago, I moved back to doing weekly episodes. And that's still in the brain somewhere. It's still tucked away, that reminder that it's every 2 weeks. It's not every 2 weeks. It's, in fact, every week. So tune in next week for a new episode of the show with a new guest and a new really fun conversation. In the meantime, stay safe, have fun. Go read some comics, goddamn you. Read some comics. The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.